Hey, what's going on, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. The footage you're seeing right now comes from the other day when I went out for a short street session here in my home of Seoul, Korea. And like so many other days when I go out to shoot street, by the time things had wrapped, I realized I hadn't captured anything that I felt was particularly strong or interesting. Now, like I said, this isn't unordinary and it's usually how things go for me, but over the years, I've come to realize that there's a bit of an art to taking quote unquote bad street photos. And I know this sounds a bit odd, but allow me to explain. Now, look, we all take bad street photos. That's just the nature of the business. But being able to recognize a bad photo for what it is, I think is actually a skill that we have to develop, and it's easier said than done. For example, if I think back to when I first started doing street photography, at that time, everything I saw and took felt like a good photo to me because at that time, everything was so unexplored and exciting and new. And look, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think that's the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be fun and new like that. It's probably what kept me from quitting in the beginning and wanting to continue taking photos. But as I stuck with it and as time went on and I continued to venture out with my camera, things slowly began to change. Shots that used to bring me so much fulfillment and joy no longer did quite in the same way. Sometimes they felt repetitive, like I had already taken that photo, or now I'd seen many others take the same photo or something similar as well. Deficiencies in my images also began to surface that I hadn't realized before. Crooked horizons, unbalanced scenes, distracting artifacts, shots with no depth, literally and metaphorically. The list for this kind of goes on and on. And this to me is where the art of taking a bad street photo comes into play. Because when we go out to shoot, and if we feel like we're knocking it out of the park every time, I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. And I think it warrants asking ourselves questions. Questions like, where are we setting the bar for our satisfaction in our photo taking? What are we trying to say with our images? And what do we consider to be a good photo and a bad photo? In the opening of this video, I shared a quote by one of my all-time favorite street photographers, Alex Webb, where he said, "Street photography is 99.9% about failure." Now, this is one of the greatest to ever do it, saying 0.1% of his street photos are successful. 0.1%. And the reason for this hyper low success rate, even from one of the best, in my opinions, is quite simple. It's because taking a good street photo is really hard to do. Not only does it take a great deal of time and practice to develop the skills to recognize and take a good photo, I might add too that acquiring these skills guarantees nothing and just helps slightly stack the deck in our favor to stumble across these photos, but also so much of what we do as street photographers is predicated upon luck. Things that are completely out of our control. Very often it's just what the world chooses to present us on that day. And even after hours and hours of walking and searching, most of the time, it's nothing. And that's just what street photography is. Now look, I definitely don't have all of the answers as I'm very much still learning myself. And I know this may come off as a little doom and gloom, and that's not my intention. Rather, I just want to say, if you've been shooting street for a while, and when you go out, you feel like often you come back with nothing to show for it, don't get down on yourself. It's normal. It's part of the process, and it's actually a good thing. I think it shows that you as a street photographer are growing and are able to distinguish for you what works in a photo and what doesn't. And most of the time in street photography, it's a doesn't. Remember, 99% failure. But just know that's okay. Because when you don't quit and you keep going, that's what makes it all the more special when the stars align and you finally take that photo that works. Because in the end, you'll have earned it, and it'll mean something, and it'll be an image that will be unmistakably and uniquely yours.